Municipal election day is less than 3 weeks away, and candidates are starting to step up efforts to mobilize their base. But in past years, turnout has been poor, and some voters and candidates are worried things this time around are going to be even less accessible. The CBC's Jacob Barker explains.
Amna Masudi is voting in Ward 10 this year and wonders if the masses will join her.
I don't think that's going to help with getting the same amount of accessibility.
She thinks the new setup may make voting less accessible for the most marginalized.
Their actual lives, day-to-day lives and their well-being is affected by all that legislature. So it's more important for their votes to get out.
The new setup has nearly the same number of polling stations as 2018, according to the city, but some of the 104 stations are in the same location.
Those locations we chose because they are more accessible for transit. There's better parking, more accessible for voters, the facility itself. And those are on, if the poll is shared between two voting subdivisions, it's often sort of on a line in between the subdivisions, so it's accessible to both.
If they can get out there, they can just get it done.
Darcy Renaud hopes to get her numbers up in this election. Last time around, she lost to Fred Francis by a wide margin. She wants to get as many supporters out in both the advanced polls and on election day.
That's a wide gap.
It's a gap. Yep. We're trying to close it this time around.
Voter turnout has remained below 50% the last 4 elections. The number bumped up in 2010 after a municipal garbage strike, but it's been decreasing ever since, slightly below the provincial average. But Renaud says she worries this time that some changes to the setup of the vote may keep voters away on election day.
I'm knocking on doors and people are saying, oh, I vote at, and I have to tell them, no, it's changed this time. You're voting at a different place. So we don't want them turning up where they voted last time and then just giving up and going home, obviously.
Advanced voting does get underway this Wednesday at the Capri Pizzeria Recreation Center. There will be a total of 8 days of advanced voting before Election Day on the 24th. That's 3 more days than the last time around. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor is moving too slowly to improve its mental health care system. That's what the head of the local Canadian Mental Health Association told me. A recent coroner's inquest has called for better access to mental health care. Matthew Mahoney lived with severe mental illness before being shot and killed by police 4 years ago. A jury made 9 recommendations last month to prevent similar deaths. Now, expanded hours and more collaboration are 2 of the ideas being discussed.
Draws attention to where we need to have very serious discussions around service delivery model changes.
It's been a little over a week since the Matthew Mahoney inquest finished, and talk to improve mental health care in our region is happening at the highest levels. One recommendation from the inquest jury: expand the hours of mental health services outside of the regular working day.
Because it sounds like it's a need. You've said it, I've heard other people say it, but who's going to say, okay, let's do it?
Yeah. So it's little by little, I know we've been chipping away to start opening our doors, various services, more so into the evening. There's already services that have moved into the evening. So we have to make that shift, and little by little we are, but again, from my perspective, just not fast enough.
Not fast enough for Mahoney's brother either. He's asked for expanded access to mental health supports since the day his brother died 4 years ago.
People do not have a crisis during office hours. They have a crisis when it happens.
Michael Mahoney is encouraged by promises to do better. Right now, though, he says the system doesn't work. Even the local Canadian Mental Health Association says it's complex to navigate.
Complex is an understatement, especially for people who don't work in that system. I would describe it as impossible to navigate.
To help navigate the system, the jury recommends the creation of a mental health advocate. For now, the CMHA says it's working with others to better coordinate all mental health services.
What we were trying to do is avoid people having to keep retelling their story, because that in itself is traumatizing. And sometimes, historically, you would have to maybe go to 2 or 3 different agencies before you land on what is the service for you. So what we want to do is get in the front of that.
It's been a work in progress for at least 3 years. She says the pandemic has played a big role in those delays. Now she hopes to have that integration in place in 6 to 8 months or sooner.
The partners also have to come together.
Bill Mara at Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare says it's cooperation, not cash, that will help.
It's about revisiting service delivery models. Are we doing things consistent with what the needs are today? And if not, let's have a conversation around changing the models.
Whatever path forward they choose, it's too late to help Matthew Mahoney. He was off his schizophrenia medication the day he was seen carrying a butcher block of knives, later being shot and killed by police. His brother says these changes people are talking about 4 years later would have absolutely helped his brother, maybe even changed the outcome. Now, wait times are also an issue the CMHA is trying to get under control. For people with severe mental illness, that can range anywhere from 2 to 6 months. The initial intake is immediate. After that is when someone may encounter some barriers. That's a concern Windsor Regional Hospital expressed during the inquest. Often they're discharging the most vulnerable people right to a wait list. There's a new partnership, though, trying to improve care for people with mild to moderate mental illness. 6 months ago, the Zero Suicide Program began. Staff from Family Services Windsor Essex are at Windsor Regional Hospital 3 times a week. They're building relationships with people in hospital for reasons related to suicide. Then, once they're discharged, Family Services takes over their care with people they already know. There aren't any waits for this program, and since it started in March, they've had 37 referrals from the hospital.
In between every appointment, every single day, these individuals who have now come into our pathway will receive what's called a non-demand caring contact. Our staff literally reach out to them every single day to check on their welfare, how they are doing with any of their therapeutic homework, that we are anticipating their return for their next session.
If you or someone you know needs help, here are a few mental health resources you can contact. Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare's 24/7 community crisis service at 519-973-4435 and Talk Suicide Canada's 24/7 telephone line at 1-833-456-4566. Ontario education workers are preparing to strike as negotiations between CUPE and the province continue. More than 96% of workers, such as librarians, custodians, and educational assistants, have voted in favor of a strike.
We do not want to strike. No one wants to strike, especially not the lowest paid education workers in Ontario. If this government will not budge, we are willing to strike for a contract that is good for students, for families, and for workers.
She was joined by other education workers at Queen's Park this morning and says more than 80% of the 55,000 workers they represent voted. Education Minister Stephen Lecce says he was extremely disappointed with the results, but adds negotiators will remain at the table to make sure kids stay in class. They're returning to the bargaining table on Thursday. An update now on last night's sudden closure of the Ambassador Bridge. Police say a suspicious package found inside a vehicle was not an explosive device. Windsor police shut down the Canadian side of the Ambassador Bridge at around 9 o'clock Sunday night. It was reopened shortly after 11. Police now say that a vehicle crossing into Canada had a suspicious locked box. Inside the box, an electronic scale, drug paraphernalia, and suspected narcotics, according to police. The Canadian Border Services Agency is now investigating. The Ontario COVID-19 Science Advisory Table's final brief is out tonight, and it's raising the alarm over the province's shortage of family doctors. It says Ontario urgently needs to do more to ensure people have access to primary care because those community-based doctors will be the ones dealing with the virus in the years ahead. Lorenda Redekop has more.
The research cites numbers, finding most little ones have a family doctor or access to primary care. But it found that 1.8 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor, with new immigrants and people in low-income neighborhoods most affected. And that number is likely an underestimate from right before the pandemic.
The number of family doctors who stopped work really skyrocketed in the first 6 months of the pandemic.
Plus, the science table finds at least 1.7 million Ontarians could lose their family doctor to retirement by 2025. This is part of the now disbanded Science Table's final report, 3 separate briefs, all on primary care.
While we spent a lot of time early in the pandemic counting hospital beds and ventilators, we now need to be looking to our capacity in primary care.
The briefs point out it's the main place COVID and long COVID will be dealt with going forward. They point to the importance of family health teams, doctors along with others, such as nurses, pharmacists, and social workers working together. Dr. Tara Kieran is part of one and says it helped with her COVID patients who were sick at home.
I had a nurse who was able to actually call them and follow up, provide them with an oxygen monitor, and then who would just only check in with me if there was something really, up that they needed my advice around.
The report shows those teams are not common in Canada overall, and even less so in Ontario for people with chronic conditions. But the researchers say COVID showed people who had access to them received better care during the pandemic, and that they're part of a solution.
We're going to have to get creative. Teams can be virtual, they can be networked across a neighborhood or a region, but they need to work together to serve the same population. They need to be able to communicate.
In a statement, the Ministry of Health says it's added over 1,800 family doctors since the PCs took office, that they're looking at allowing doctors from other parts of the country to practice here and better using foreign-trained physicians. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
We have an update tonight on the Windsor-Detroit tunnel bus. The city now has a date when it will return to service. The bus will return on November 20th. That's according to the latest update on Transit Windsor's website. It's been down since March of 2020 when the pandemic started. People have advocated for its return for months. The operator saying it wasn't possible until the ArriveCan app was removed. That app is now optional. Special event service for NFL or NHL games and concerts remains suspended. It'll cost $7.50 one way or $15 for a round trip. No details on a schedule just yet. Ottawa has announced new sanctions against Iran. It's targeting senior members of the Iranian regime, including members of the Revolutionary Guard, over the death of a woman who died in police custody. But as CBC's Tom Perry reports, activists say Canada needs to go even further in its efforts to isolate the Middle Eastern country.
In Iran, the protests continue, demonstrators venting their anger over the death of Mahsa Amini, the young woman who died after being detained by Iran's morality police. While expressing sympathy for Amini, Iran's supreme leader calls the ongoing demonstrations riots designed by America. Today, a response from Canada. New sanctions targeting 25 individuals and 9 organizations, including Iran's morality police and senior members of its Revolutionary Guard.
Well, I think the sanctions are a good starting point, but by no means are they satisfactory to those of us that work on Iran issues.
Lawyer Kavash Aruz helped organize a rally this past weekend in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. Tens of thousands of people came out to denounce Iran's leadership and call on Canada to take a tougher stance against Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the group responsible for shooting down Flight PS 752 in 2020, killing 176 people, including more than 50 Canadians, demanding Ottawa declare it a terror group.
When you're listed as a terror organization, your assets are immediately frozen. Affiliation with a terrorist organization is a criminal offense under our criminal code.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took part in the weekend rally and today called out the Prime Minister for skipping the event.
The Prime Minister didn't have the guts to show up because he didn't want to have to explain why he has failed to criminalize the IRGC, the terrorist arm of the Iranian government, which killed over 50 Canadians when it attacked a civilian aircraft.
We are imposing new sanctions, and you know what, Mr. Speaker? We will do more because more needs to be done. Thank you.
Melanie Joly says more sanctions are on the way, that all options are on the table. The opposition calls that empty words and says what's needed right now is action. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal government has signed a rare and historic agreement to give back land to a First Nation in Ontario. It will see more than 120 hectares returned to the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. They will also receive more than $30 million for the loss of the land's use. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has that story.
This is the quarry, which is only a small portion of the claim.
The Kimmett family lives on the front line of a land claim battle. one they're hoping will end by transferring more than 120 hectares to the federal government.
We're in an unfortunate position where we're kind of in harm's way, and so we became willing sellers.
This land has been a source of conflict for decades, and even though these fields in the quarry down this road will be returned to the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, this only resolves part of the dispute. The town of Deseronto, Ontario, is built on the Mohawks' unsurrendered territory.
We are looking for the lands to be returned.
The chief is trying to reclaim more than 240 hectares and has made a financial offer to the town.
The facts are not often in Canada's favor.
The Crown Indigenous Relations Minister says he's considering changes to speed up the process, but the policy will remain willing seller, willing buyer.
This isn't an eviction notice by any stretch of the imagination. This is a process where there will be a consent-based approach to returning land.
I see this as nothing but a scam.
Some traditional members of the community are worried they won't be able to use the land they've fought for.
The Mohawk people are the owners of the land, not a federal institution such as the Band Council.
Even though this part of the land claim is settled, the fight is far from over. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Deseronto, Ontario.
We're big on bird watching out here in Windsor, Essex, and one birder is trying to push the boundaries of what we know. Joe Pitawanakwat is writing the definitive guide of bird names into the language spoken by Anishinaabe people. He's trying to help name as many as possible in the Indigenous language. Our Jacob Barker checked in on how it's going, learning a few things along the way, starting with the name for blackbirds.
That's a behavior, I guess, that we have understood. All of the blackbirds have this sneeze that they do, where they'll ruffle their feathers and then and sneeze, and it's really, really funny to be able to hear and see that. You know, that's a common grackle is a backyard bird, and it's probably the most common blackbird for people to experience. Its name, though, you know, Jachakano is the family of blackbirds. The common grackle, we call them a signok. A sig is when something is being grouped together. Something is all being clumped together, squashed together. And so signok are common grackles, you know, just because of the murmurations that they could create, the massive flocks, like especially during mating and migration. And the other more common blackbird in this family of sneezers is red-winged blackbird, which is just simply Mesquanage, which is just describing the red shoulder. Squa is red, and Mesquanage is the red shoulder that they have. But yeah, all the blackbirds, they're sneezers.
A siganok.
Yeah, that's the grackle. The red-winged blackbird is Mesquanage.
Mesquanage.
Yeah.
And we've got more of those on our website. We'll play another one later in the show as well. Still to come, though, here on CBC Windsor News Live at 6. Your full weather forecast is coming up right after the break. And we're back now for a quick look at weather. And if you missed us on Friday, Josiah Sinanen is joining our show while Colette Kennedy is away. You can hear him on CBC Radio's Afternoon Drive each day during the week. Josiah, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Jason. Good to be back.
So what have you got for us in terms of weather?
Yeah, let's take a look at that 5-day forecast again. A couple things coming up. We're currently sitting around 14 degrees with clear skies, dropping down to a low of 2 tonight. There is a frost advisory, so it's going to be a chilly one. But then we take a turn for the best. Highs of 21 and 22 for Tuesday and Wednesday, and a warm evening on Wednesday with a low of 11. So hang on just a little bit longer. With Thursday comes a 30% chance of showers, a high of 20 and a low of 6 in the evening. That evening, 60% chance of rain. And on Friday, that rain continues, but it does peter off by the evening, a high of 11 and a low of 2 before that Thanksgiving long weekend. We'll take a look at those weekend forecasts a bit later this week. Now, Jason, I know Thanksgiving is just around the corner, as we mentioned, but it's also officially October. Do you think it's too early to start decorating for Halloween?
I don't mind seeing some spooky houses. I know my kids sure don't. They love seeing like the inflatables or people who go all out. So I don't think it's too early.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely spotted some things around Windsor, Essex. Take a look at this photo I took on Riverside. Pretty epic.
Wow.
That's already up there. But wait, we have another one too. This is back in September. This photo was taken. So people seem to be excited around Essex County, and that's just up the road from us in Crawford.
Wow, yeah, I don't mind seeing that. I mean, my wife loves Christmas, so we kind of go out all out for Christmas.
Right.
So if it were up to her, I'm sure she'd be decorating for Christmas right now. So I kind of have to reel it in a little bit. We'll go through Halloween, and then we'll make our way through.
You bought yourself some time.
Yeah.
Any pumpkins going up or anything?
We have two. We don't decorate much for Halloween. We have two big pumpkins, but the lights have burnt out in them, so we kind of just put them out. We really need to kind of up our game. Our kids are getting a bit older.
That's fair.
But we'll see.
Well, hey, if you guys have pictures of your own decorations, send them my way on Instagram or Twitter.
All right, thanks so much, Josiah.
Thank you, Jason.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News, we'll take you back to learn about some more of those Indigenous bird names. That story is coming up right after the break.
home.
Folks in Dresden have some new neighbors. They've moved into a place that's got an eerie vibe to it.
It's everything we've ever dreamed of.
We were like, oh damn, we're going to have to buy this building.
It's amazing. I realized that it was a funeral home. Oh, what have we done?
Meet the Blumbergs. They've bought their dream home in Chatham, Kent, with plans to renovate the old funeral home as a family home. They're sharing the entire experience on Discovery Plus. Part of the fun for them, turning rooms once used to help families say a final goodbye into spaces where they can watch their kids grow up.
We had some fun in some of the other areas, like what we can say is we took the embalming room and turned it into a cigar lounge, and we took the storage room and the casket bar and turned it into a speakeasy. There's some interesting, we've played into the theme of a funeral home in a couple of spaces. Not everywhere, it's not gimmicky, but we've definitely had some fun with it.
And before we go, another bird name to learn in the language spoken by Anishinaabe people. These are all compiled by Joe Pitawanakwet. He took the time to help the CBC's Jacob Barker learn the names.
American goldfinches. We call them aginjibwese. Aginje is like the process of counting. So aginjibwese, the last part of that name, bugwese, buck, is leaf. And so aginjibwese is somebody who is out there counting leaves. There's stories of birds that I haven't been able to capture, and I don't know why. This is the bird that counts leaves all day long. What the significance of that story is, and I'm always trying to figure it out. But when you're looking at them, I think one of the interesting physical characteristics that they carry is their black wing in its resting position. It looks like a leaf sitting on the side of the bird. But yeah, that goldfinch aginjibwese is the one who counts leaves. We say aginjibwese.
Aginjibwese.
Yeah, aginjibwese.
Aginjibwese.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Thank you so much for watching. For news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Have a great night.